Our biggest value prop is that for the first time ever, you as a fan of The Wolf of Wall Street, you can own a piece of the revenue streams from Wolf of Wall Street. That's something that's never happened for a major feature film or a major movie.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Hiram Vasquez, CEO and founder of LALA. LALA is a digital collectible marketplace that for the first time ever gives fans of movies and television shows new points of access and ownership over their favorite stories. Hiram, I'm so excited to chat with you, not only because of your entrepreneurial journey and honestly the teams you've been a part of, the new product, the new idea, especially also LALA is coming at a really interesting time if people are aware of where entertainment is and a lot of the friction that's surrounding entertainment. It's interesting to see a lot of the kind of smaller, more up and coming or different avenues really erupting out of this restlessness. So we'll touch on that in a second. But before we get into all that good stuff, what were you doing before you started the company?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's related to Lala. Before starting the company, I was working at 776,
Yeah.
which is a venture fund founded by Alexis Ohanian, co-founder or former founder of Reddit, and I was there as an operator in residence.
Yeah.
It's a program where they were looking for different people with different backgrounds. My background specifically is product,
Yeah.
but they're looking for operators with experience in early stage startups and growth startups that have a track record of success building product to help early stage startups build their own in the portfolio
Sure.
of the fund, build their companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And what got you there?
that's a good question. I was actually like 2020 or 2020, right after COVID happened. I was working for an early stage startup that was about to go like a growth stage startup in corporate travel and corporate accommodations or
Yeah.
short-term rentals.
Yeah.
When COVID happened, business travel pretty much went to zero overnight.
Yeah.
So the future of the company was very unclear. I was personally trying to figure out what was gonna be my next step or my next challenge. And like I had, as everyone else during COVID, had a lot of time to think about my journey and what I wanted to do. And then one day I was on LinkedIn and used to follow Alexis Ohanian,
Yeah.
and he made a post. I was like, hey, I'm starting this new venture fund where we are focusing on giving underrepresented founders access to venture capital.
Wow. Yeah.
That to me, talk about giving points of access to underrepresented populations, right?
Yeah.
Alexis was building this venture fund to do just that, and that caught my attention. And he was also targeting operators from underrepresented backgrounds to come and join the team. So
Perfect.
it was kind of a no-brainer. Also, a very last-minute decision because the deadline for the application was the day after Thanksgiving.
Cool.
So it was like, I was like, do I spend Thanksgiving like filling out this application and all that? But yeah, over 1,100 people applied. I was part of a team of 3 operators that got the job. So yeah, super excited and yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting too, and obviously the audience doesn't know your background a lot. This isn't your first startup. This isn't your first kind of growth stage company. Describe kind of what you've learned over time and coming from your background, what was particularly challenging about some of the learning curve adjusting to just different markets and different startups. Describe your journey a little bit more pre-operator, pre-776, kind of up and coming, what you've seen and what you've experienced.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest learnings that I've experienced, especially when it comes to startups, is that you're never going to have a full set of data or information to make your decisions, and you have to be very comfortable in just mitigating risk as much as possible, but sometimes taking too much time to make a decision can be a risk itself. So it's always a balance of, okay, like how much information do I need to make this decision and like measure or try to take that into consideration versus taking too much time to get the right answer, and then you either like launch too late or timing like it's not in your favor.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that before starting working for startups and looking for the outside, I always thought that like people always knew what they were doing, and like they were like taking very educated guess, and the facts are that a lot of times it's just making the best of a situation, or try to make as much of an educated guess, but there are a lot of unknowns.
Yeah. Shifting focus to LALA, it's interesting to think about kind of the idea of ownership with entertainment and content, because it's not the first time it's been proposed, right? Not even just in a Web3 space, but overall with certain crowdfundings. I think a lot of the independent films in a lot of those, they go through those types of models almost as a seed stage startup, and then it continues to grow. Describe a lot of the process around like how these projects think about a lot of these entertainment projects, how they get funded, and what is missing from the consumer level, or that you saw that needed to kind of bring those projects actually closer to who was ingesting them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the current process of how certain project gets funded, a lot of times it's a production company, right? The company that's creating the movie or TV show, they get funding by pitching investors, usually high net worth individuals or people that are in that scene. And if it's a small budget movie, they could just do that and release as an indie. But that brings the challenges of distribution and all that. And then from the studio-backed movies, bigger budgets. But again, it's usually like the studio buys the movie, other creates, or even self-funds part or the entire movie for them to distribute as they wish. And those are kind of like the Barbies and the Ninja Turtles and the Oppenheimers.
What's in it for them, those who do fund smaller projects? Because it seems like you think about maybe larger studios, box office, ticket prices, there's a lot of revenue you can kind of track, but what's in it for those who are funding smaller projects?
Well, what's in it is the hope that either they can find a big studio to buy the movie from them, which happens all the time. And that's why a lot of the times at festivals like Cannes and Sundance, indie movie producers go there to show their movies for the big studios to buy. So that's and then once they do that, they have a participation in the movie. They get picked up by a big studio with their distribution. They can make a good amount of money.
And then it seems like it also compounds. Once you have one decently successful project, you might have another, and it continues.
Right.
Through this process, it seems like it productizes a lot of the material, but a lot of it seems like it's a little, I don't want to say disconnected from the audience, but it doesn't seem to necessarily, it's not like, it doesn't sound like the narrative is, I'm going to invest in this project because I want to address this audience over this particular topic. Do you see that a lot, or is that just something that we're not seeing from the outside, but is maybe being talked about behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the times, and this is why to this day, there's a lot of focus whenever a movie releases in the box office, right? It's the studios can do a lot of research and have a big budget for marketing and marketing campaigns. But at the end of the day, they don't really know what the reception will be from fans until it's out there, and then let's see how they do during their first weekend in the box office, and that usually dictates kind of like the fate of the movie in a sense, and also it dictates how much more money the studio invests in the promotion of the movie. So I know that from what I see, I know that you see where this is coming, where fans that could be potentially interested in a movie they don't really find out about this movie until it gets announced, or
Right.
when it gets marketed to the public, or it gets or it comes to theaters.
Yeah.
So how do you tap into a fan community where someone might be interested in the topic that you're of the movie that you're creating,
Hmm.
or interested in those stories before it comes out? How do you tap into that community?
Yeah.
That's one of the problems that over time we think Lala can be that solution
Yeah.
where we can solve that problem.
It's fascinating to think about. I feel like if you could easily fall under the thought of like, oh, how many consumers are actually wanting a certain narrative or certain movie, but you realize there's so much fan favor around a lot of these stories, right? Like, I think if correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure 50 Shades of Grey came out of like some fan fiction of Twilight or something like that, right? It's like it's so much more material is generated by the audience that's consuming who actually enjoy these original stories. Do you see how is it I guess how is it where do you find that audience? Like where do you find those people who want to see certain narratives being played out or want to see certain adaptations on screen? Where do you find them, and what types of people are they? Are they all part of entertainment? Are they on the periphery? Who are these individuals?
Well, a lot of the conversation is happening online.
Yeah.
Like the movie subreddit is actually the number 6 subreddit of the entire platform, with like over 30 million people.
Yeah. Wow.
So there's a lot of people that breathe and live these movies and like really feel really passionate about this. And they're just during their free time, they just write about it, discuss, create fan art, etc., etc. It just so happens it's happening in Reddit, in Twitter, in Instagram, in TikTok, all
Yeah.
these in YouTube, all these different channels where fans are congregating by themselves
Mm-hmm.
to talk about this, but there's no the big studios or IP owners have never been able to like plug into that conversation
Yeah.
successfully.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. I don't know if you have a percentage, but what percentage of movies, TV shows are being made with the input or the collaboration with the audience, or made for a particular type of audience? How many of those? I guess, in your opinion, what would be the proportion?
The, to be honest, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
The one thing that it's very clear in Hollywood right now, it's like it's all about known IP,
Mm-hmm.
and the argument that there's so many reruns. We have 10 Fast and the Furious movies, 6 Mission Impossible movies. You have all these big franchises which make a good amount of money, and can't blame for going after that. But so they're I feel like the studios are trying to take out those unknowns
Sure.
from making these movies and going with the sure hits.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Obviously, they're investing it because they have the sure hits. But is there any hesitation of just trying new things because it just won't be successful? How much of that will impact a large studio if something isn't successful that they've taken a chance on?
That's a good question, and like this might be this might be a hot topic with people in the industry. But I recently read this blog post or a Substack of how like back in the 90s the head of studios were in their 30s, in their 40s, very young heads of studios, and like there are a lot more diverse stories being told in terms of type of stories and movies and shows, and less franchises like today.
Yeah.
And you see like the head of studios now, they've been there for years and years and years, and there might be a correlation between that and the risk aversion of
Sure.
going after new projects or taking those risks. Because at the end of the day, like if you have it's an industry that like it's risks. If you take risks that don't pay off, it can be detrimental to your career.
It's so fascinating to think about how it's kind of counterintuitive that the the increase or the magnification of whatever project actually decreases the, I guess, level of innovation or level of trying something new. It seems to be more of the inverse and become more conservative in the chances. And it seems like that's what we see with a lot of these franchises. I'm curious to hear your take, because those who don't know that there's a lot of strikes going on in the entertainment industry, both from writers, from actors, and a lot of it's around a few different topics, I think, that's circulating. What are some topics that you've heard from your perspective? And also, what is the cause of a lot of this restlessness that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think the two big topics right now is number one, the use of AI
Yeah.
and the creation of a show or movie. From one of the things that came out is like from the writer's strike first, that started before the actor's strike, was the use of AI to write scripts.
Yeah.
That's like their writers are arguing that they right now a lot of the time they don't make enough to make a living to cover all their costs. So not only that, but they're also facing studios that want to use AI to kind of replace them or not have to use as many writers as they do now, which it's very controversial. I think like there's a lot there, and on the side of the writers, I can understand their concern.
Yeah.
Right? And to be fair, I've used ChatGPT and those and the existing tools to try to write something that sounds great, and or that like connects on a deeper level to humans, but they're no Aaron Sorkin or you can't replace good writing with ChatGPT. So.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about what that does and impact, because there's so many different arguments going out there from what I've heard about, like, well, what if it's just used for editing? What if, and obviously the term slippery slope gets thrown around because you do one thing and it leads and compounds onto something else. But in regards to what the strikes have had an effect on, say, the smaller, more independent type of projects, I've heard my partner, she's in entertainment, so she keeps me fairly updated. So I have a little bit of a leg ahead. But she was talking about how the smaller studios are open to making those compromises with these guilds or with these unions to actually, whether it's pay writers more or give actors lunchtime, who knows? There's a lot of interesting arguments going around. What is that? What? And she was getting excited about this potential of a renaissance in a way. Have you seen a lot of smaller, more independent, or even just through LALA funded projects that are gaining more traction because of this turmoil with these big studios? What have you seen?
So today I saw a tweet, I believe on Twitter, someone saying that the A24, which is the biggest independent studio out there, they've done a great job. The reason why they're actually, there's no strike for them. The SAG-AFTRA gave them the green light to keep working on their productions, is because they agreed to all of SAG-AFTRA's demands. I didn't read that from like a media outlet or news source, so I don't. But if that's right, then that makes the big studios look bad, right? Because if it works for a smaller player, then why doesn't it work for the bigger ones with more resources?
Yeah.
So there's something there. But for the small producers or directors or amateur filmmakers, having these tools for editing, writing, or allowing them to at least use AI in different ways to accelerate the process can be a renaissance, can allow a team of 2 or 3 filmmakers to create an amazing production because the tools are getting better.
Yeah.
So the quality of their content is getting better. And that's like, it doesn't only apply to filmmakers, also to content creators out there. For the younger generation, they prefer to be on TikTok than to spend $25 or $30 to watch a movie that might not be that good, to go to the theaters to watch that movie. So something will have to change, and that's that's kind of like where we come from.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, shifting our focus to Lala, what has been the experience of connecting consumers extremely close with the stories that they love? Describe some things that have been interesting and some insights you've gained, but also one thing that's particularly exciting is your current partnership with Wolf of Wall Street, which I thought was particularly interesting, being that it is a movie that's been out for a while. It seems like it's still in popularity, and how the heck were you able to go and partner with them to be able to create this collaboration? And what does that mean for future partnerships for your company?
Yeah, absolutely. Like working on our launch, we wanted to land a big IP to make some noise. Considering LALA is a new brand, we announced the company a few months ago. We launched our product very recently. We wanted to get as much brand awareness and create as much impact as possible. So getting and also with an IP that people already know and love, and an IP that has stayed relevant very relevant over the last decade.
Yeah.
Which Wolf of Wall Street this year is actually the 10th anniversary, so
Oh, really?
that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah.
Over the last years, has become very relevant. A lot of memes out there being used on a weekly basis that I see on Twitter, Instagram. Great talent, both on the director side and the actors.
Yeah.
So all those different variables made it a great option to
Yeah.
launch our not only our brand but also our product with.
Yeah. And what are some things that consumers can expect? What does this launch mean for someone like me who say I was a fan of the movie, now I can connect to it even further? What can I expect out of Lala?
Yeah, absolutely. So our biggest value prop is that for the first time ever, you as a fan of the Wolf of Wall Street, you can own a piece of the revenue streams from Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
That's something that's never happened for a major feature film or a major movie. And it's something that, to me, it makes sense. When you talk about, which you talk a lot of to startup founders, the reason why startup founders give equity to employees is because they want to participate in the upside of the company. They want the employees to act as owners. They want employees to care about the work that they do. This is the same way that founders care.
Yeah.
So in an attention economy, when there's so much competition for people's time, how do you get people excited or get people to care about your content?
Yeah.
Over time, especially like with all the content that's being pumped out there with AI content, it'll be even more.
Yeah.
So how do you compete?
Yeah. It's interesting because it's also not just for, say, like the absolute fan, but I think anyone who wants to be a part of the development. And when did that change start? Because it seems like maybe it was COVID where we felt a huge oversaturation of things that necessarily were closely related to shows and TVs and things that we liked, but I think lacked a lot of genuine new kind of adventure, intrigue, some kind of new experience. What does this mean in terms of not only the connection they can have with the shows and entertainment that they like, but also the development? Will they be part of the process? Do you envision that becoming maybe even a future aspect of LALA?
Absolutely. So our North Star as a company is to allow fans to create new connections and new points of access.
Yeah.
That's very broad on purpose.
Right.
But from giving ownership to people to give access to certain events, certain screenings of new chapters of that IP or IP that's attracts or directed to similar demographics, is getting people more involved in learning about the behind the scenes and how the sausage gets made, and really like geek out in that world, but also like learn about, or give access or to new experiences for them.
Yeah. Thinking about the traction that you've seen so far, obviously the product's launched, it's had such an exciting traction up to this point. What's particularly exciting about the next phase of growth? And if everything goes well, what's the long-term vision?
There's so much, but for the fans, for the fans is to like to really give a allow fans to live or relive these stories or connect with these stories in a new way, in a deeper way, to connect with each other by celebrating these stories and creating a community around this. And also in to be honest, to get more value from their money.
Yeah.
At the moment or up to today, the relationship between IP owners and fans or community has been pretty much one-sided.
Sure.
With fans always like having to pay or for every single point of contact with this IP or with multiple IP. When now there's going to have to be a two-way relationship, give and take, because as I mentioned before, the competition's hard or it's tough right now.
Yeah.
It's going to get tougher with user-generated content and also younger filmmakers that have a very minimal budget but are very resourceful, and now the tools are getting a lot better. So the relationship will have to change, and it's not. And then on why would studios want to change? Because and this is why also like why now question of why do we exist? With the advancement in blockchain technology, which is something that I do not focus on when I talk to LALA, but something that's important is like now you can understand who your biggest fans are because you have a record or receipts of like who has held on to these collectibles for 2-3 years and who has gone to these events related to this movie or to this TV show. So you have a record of all this, and you can make sense of who your top fans are. In an industry where it's every movie for, let's say, a franchise, for, let's say, Fast and Furious, which is the example that I used. Studios usually have a $100 million budget. They start from zero pretty much in trying to get people to go to the theaters to watch a movie. It's kind of like a blind process, and it's very inefficient. So what if you knew the top 100, top 500, top 1,000 fans that have watched every single movie, that have all the collectibles, that bought the action figures, and you can directly connect with them and invite them to a screening of your new movie?
Yeah.
It makes it a lot more efficient.
Yeah. I love this next section. I call it my founder FAQ. So I'm gonna hit you with some rapid fire questions, and I'm gonna add some things in here. But I always like to open it up with what's particularly hard about your job day to day.
Particularly hard about my job day to day is that as an early stage founder, you get a lot of no's, and you get a lot of people that don't get your vision, or they don't know you, and they're not interested in talking to you or connecting with you or spend time with you. So that's something that like for I was talking to another founder recently, and he's like at growth stage now, but he was like, like early days, for only 100 calls, I would get 99 no's.
Yeah.
That's something that's a fact that happens.
Yeah,
so
but it just
that
takes
can be
one
difficult.
yes, right? Like it just takes that one, right? The Wolf of Wall Street yes was a pretty nice yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How does this change? How does LALA change the accountability for projects to actually get done? Because you hear about delays all the time, you hear about changes and who's working on certain projects, turmoil, conflict. Is there a world where having people who want to see a project finished and enjoy it and maybe even see its growth over time, does it change the accountability for people who are creating it? And also, does it change how they'll gain in reputation?
That's a good question. I believe that like there's so many factors that are involved in making a movie, and so many variables of things that get delayed or things that go wrong, which not unlike startups, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like building product or building software, it's usually takes a lot longer than what you estimate it'll
yeah,
take.
yeah,
So building with a larger set of investors or people that are like that are involved in the fundraising
yeah,
will definitely put a more pressure, right? The
yeah,
same way that if you're a founder and you have one investor versus if you have 50 investors asking you questions, it'll put a little bit more pressure and you have to be on top of everything. So, it's very possible that you will have, like you'll have to get more
yeah,
more
yeah,
on
yeah,
top of things, and
yeah.
yeah.
I was thinking one thing that was particularly I was excited about was seeing that a lot of the art was done by someone actually based in Lima, Peru. And yeah, I run a company. We've been running it for over 3 years. We connect a lot of Latin American talent with opportunities in the U.S.
Awesome.
What's been particularly exciting about tapping into resources in South America or in other parts that wasn't necessarily available even 2, maybe even a year ago? What's been exciting about utilizing and connecting with talent abroad for a founder?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm part of that group,
Yeah.
right? Like I was born and raised in Puerto Rico,
Yeah.
so I when I started this company, I did not just want to create new points of access to the consumers, the collectors. I also wanted to create opportunities for the creators who
Yeah.
are also fans to be able to use this IP and co-create with this IP, which in an industry that has so many very few gatekeepers and it's very relationship based,
Yeah.
it's very difficult for someone outside of that circle to have the opportunity to create with that IP. So I wouldn't say that I excluded talent that doesn't fit that bucket, but it's something that I seeked out to just look past just the US or just like
Yeah.
the Hollywood space or the entertainment space and look at like what I actually found him on Instagram, and his art is amazing, and
Yeah.
he's a fan himself of the movie, so I'm glad that it worked out.
That's so funny. I'm launching a new product, and I was looking through a lot of designers on Instagram, and it's so impressive to see not only who's working on what projects, but what's popular, what's not popular, who has the capacity to innovate. I guess personal question as a founder, when you're going through that process, how do you find the right person to develop, whether it's a brand image or a product, a piece of design, when you personally don't come from that as a founder, or maybe you do, but for most founders, they don't come from that creative of a background. How do you select the right person for your project? Is it feel? Is it gut?
That's a good question. Look, I definitely can't design myself, or I have very limited design skills, but I've always been good at curating.
Mm,
Back when I was younger in my high school, college days, and then after that was with DJing.
yeah,
I used to play a lot of different events and be able to adapt my style to the event and the crowd at that event.
yeah,
So like that to startups, it's not very different to be able to like take cues from your audience and like find the right fit for what they would like.
mhm,
And with design and talent, that's why I lean on that. A lot
yeah,
of it's the work that they're putting out there,
yeah.
and then the conversations and see how they can fit into what I'm envisioning.
Yeah, relinquishing that trust though is a little hard, but it typically works out well
Yeah.
when you do enable people. What's something as a founder you're good at now, but you wish you were better at earlier on?
That I'm good at now. I think just empowering people.
Mm,
Just I wish back then when I was younger in my earlier in my career that I would just empower people and let them do their thing. I would say like just that and over the idea of having control, or which
Yeah.
is usually not the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, just empowering people makes a difference, and that's how you scale, or your project scales.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think increasing these points of access, not only for fans and moviegoers, but even for international talent, people not traditionally thought of when they're working on projects like this? When you think about what that does, what are some outcomes that you hope that increasing points of access has, whether it's on your product or in the world otherwise?
Yeah, look, as I mentioned before, I grew up in Puerto Rico, and new point of access. I actually learned to speak English by watching movies and TV shows, and a lot of the merch that was, for example, like the Home Alone
Yep.
recorder that Kevin used. Like that type of merch didn't make it to Puerto Rico when I was a young kid. I wanted to get my hands on it, or like the sweepstakes that they promoted in the back of cereal boxes always excluded Puerto Rico residents.
Yeah.
So that the idea of new points of access and ownership was a thing that became very personal for me, because it was Hollywood was always very far away. It seems like
Yeah.
this elusive thing.
Yeah.
So I hope that the impact that I have, if anything, is to prove that it's possible to find talent outside of the entertainment space, or outside of this archetype for where talent lives, or what talent looks like, to help open doors to amazing talent like that, to help open doors to people that are very passionate about these stories and want to get involved in new ways.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I hope
Yeah.
this inspires.
It's also amazing to see that from the studio perspective, or whoever's making these projects, they can access more fans, and it's so exciting
Hmm.
seeing. And one thing that's been increasingly, I think, more prevalent is the global distribution of a lot of different type of, whether it's shows or TV. Like it seems that language is no longer a boundary, and it's really just about what's going to grab attention. And that's interesting to see the dynamics of different cultures really liking something from a completely far off location that ended up adopting it. For some reason, there's a connection. I know we're coming at the end of the show here, so I always like to ask this question: whether it was early in your career or now, what books or people have had a lasting impact on you?
That's a very good question. One of my favorite books, that it's not really an entrepreneurship but it talks about a lot about entrepreneurship, is Shoe Dog,
Yeah.
the Nike founder Phil Knight. Yeah, and one of the things that that really stuck with me is just how many times, like throughout his the beginning, the early days of Nike, or like so many barriers and blockers and emergencies that happen, like from the outside. A lot of times, and when people look at a startup or a company that from the outside is looking great, there's so much going on the inside, so many fires to put out,
Yeah.
and to know that companies like Nike also went through that for periods, like over, like I think it was like the first 10 or 20 years. It
Yeah.
was a lot of times it almost failed,
Yeah.
and he kept pushing. That's something that really stayed with me.
Yeah, yeah. It's so true. It's so true. That just knowing that someone else went through a similar process to really, people don't know what it means to deliver a product, a really high valuable product, and how much work really goes into it, because it's got to be so well thought out. Got to have a story. It's got to deliver consistently. So many things, right? We can think about. That's a good one. That's a good one. That one hasn't been brought up in a while, but I might have to throw that on my audiobooks. I selfishly asked that also for my own reading list. But last question here, Hiram, and it's been such a pleasure not only learning about you and your background, your experience, what you think LALA can actually do in terms of increasing points of access. Is there anything, any topic, any question I didn't ask you that I should have, anything we left on the table here today?
Let's see. I mean, so one thing is that related to our product, with the Wolf of Wall Street, we launched the product last week, and we're making it very easy for people to buy into this.
Yeah.
Even though yes, these are digital collectibles on the blockchain. We're abstracting away all the friction from the experience of buying into this. So we're providing a very common and experience in the way that you sign up with your email. We don't have to use cryptocurrencies. You just sign up, pay with a credit card or debit card, and you're in. We make it very easy. And yeah, that's something that I'm super excited to have more people join our community. Our website is lala.xyz. For anyone interested, they can check it out.
Yeah. And where can we find you? Where can we find you on socials, LinkedIn? You know, where are you live?
Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter is at Hiram V. Yeah, you can find me, DM me, or follow me, or tweet at me, and I'll respond. Always looking forward for feedback and meet new people. So
amazing. Hiram, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show, learning about your experience, but also where you view this ownership and this ownership to entertainment and consumer model. So fascinating as it gets closer and closer together. I think a lot of restlessness is really kind of promoting that eventual future. So it's awesome to see you at the head of it and where LALA will go. So thank you so much, Hiram. I hope you enjoyed yourself on Behind Company Lines today.
Thank you so much for having me on, and it's great connecting with you as well.
Of course.